Hi, everyone. Welcome to Solving Sustainability's second episode, Solving Solar. If you're new here, Solving Sustainability is a live podcast and panel discussion followed by a networking firm where we discuss all about sustainability, including social, economical, and environmental factors. Today, we're here to talk about solar energy. I'm Rashita, your moderator.
And I'm Chris, your co moderator, and we're all very excited to have you all with us today.
Joining us here are our three wonderful panelists. Dr. Steve Kalland, Executive Director of Energy Collaborative, longtime clean energy policy and market expert, leading NC State's clean energy education and policy efforts. Our next speaker, Dr. Raheem Ariwoola, currently working at NC State as a program manager of NC State's utility reduction program and working on energy optimization projects. And for our third speaker, we have Mr. Shasten Jolley, manager of Green Tech Renewables in North Carolina, bringing over 5 years of experience in leadership in solar industry.
Now, before we dive into our questions and learn from our panelists' experience, let's take a moment to get on the same page about solar energy, which you can see on the slide here. Solar energy starts with sunlight, which carries energy in the form of photons. Solar panels, usually made of silicon, capture that sunlight and convert it into electricity. When photons hit the panel, they excite electrons in the silicon, creating a flow of electricity that can power buildings, devices, or be stored in batteries for later use as well.
While the process may sound simple, it relies on careful engineering to be efficient. Modern solar panels convert roughly 15 to 22% of sunlight they receive into electricity. That may seem low, but sunlight is free, renewable, and available globally, which makes solar power a key part of clean energy transition.
Now, solar has its obvious drawbacks as well. It only produces power when the sun is shining, so at night or on cloudy days, generation drops, and this means that solar relies on the grid or storage systems to balance supply and demand. Because of this, large-scale projects like the Banban Solar Park in Egypt or even space-based solar concepts are exploring ways to capture more energy and distribute it efficiently. But for now, these remain limited by cost and technology.
So, in short, solar power is a powerful, renewable source of energy with huge potential. But like any technology, it comes with trade offs that shape how it's used in real world. With that context, we are ready to turn to our panelists and learn from them. So, like we discussed, solar energy is often celebrated as clean, abundant, and renewable. But how do you each see solar power's role in building a sustainable future, keeping in mind the cost of the grid, batteries, and e waste associated? Dr. Rahim, why don't you start us off?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. So, when I look at the future of solar PV, I take into consideration other renewables. So, because this is going to be integrated with other renewables that are currently growing right now. First, about the cost. Again, the efficiency. And thirdly, when we look at the environmental impact, so all these we put into consideration to determine what the future of solar PV, solar is going to look like. So when we talk about the efficiency itself, it's constantly solar PV has been constantly, in research, trying to improve all the efficiencies. So, but right now, the cost has gone down. I mean, back in the 30 years, the cost per kWh was pretty much higher. But just of recent, the cost has been so lower. And with that regard, so it's become pretty much like more valuable and widely spread, installed across different places. But as long as that particular cost keeps driving down in the future, it's going to be something more valuable to people to kind of use. So when we talk about these and the integration of other renewables, so how does levelized cost of solar PV kind of comes in? So talk of the other renewables like wind energy, the battery, having having this to be stored. So the solar PV, when we look at it in that particular term, will have in the future probably will be more widely spread, and people will have good installation. So in terms of how the waste, how we're gonna have to recycle at the end of the life. So I think solar PV is there will probably need to be some kind of improvement looking at the materials. So there's been some advances in some of the new materials that are used in different technologies for the solar PV now that are environmental friendly, and those could be recycled easily. But right now, the vast majority of the PV that we got on ground are monocrystalline solar cells. There's been some industries that you can easily, recycle the system. But looking at the United States currently, it's much cheaper to kind of dump the solar PV in the trash rather than recycling. So looking at that cost, so they probably need some kind of innovation in how we will have to kind of recycle the solar PV. And once that is taken care of, I think in the future that's gonna be something that is that will make solar PV more valuable. So in terms of how we want to have this in the future for sustainability as perspective, I see the future in solar PV, integrating with the other renewables that we have on the grid, and performing a very good function in solving the environmental issues that we are currently battling with. So in that regard, again, there'll probably be some advancement, improvement in terms of research, the interconnection, how we connect this to the grid in order to kind of make that happen. When we look at some other areas, like what are the factors that would prevent people from adopting the solar PV for future cases? Based on my experience, I've seen some homeowners or homeowner associations, trying to push back onto having solar PVs on the roofs, just because of the aesthetics, the way it kind of looks in some people. And if you're like me, like an engineer, I don't care how things look. I just want something efficient, right? And something that brings more money to my family that I can use for something else. But the advancement that is going on with the future of solar PV, you can have some materials like the thin film cells that are flexible, that can lay, that can be integrated with even the glasses, the fenestration of the building, that can lie straight on the roof and can be integrated with materials in the roof. So there are different things that are going on right now. So, but looking aesthetically, there needs to be some kind of improvement. Looking technically, so there needs to be some kind of improvement in the efficiency. The cost has to go down, and that is the way I think solar PV will be able to kind of compete with other renewable energies in the future. So to sum it up, so I see a very great future in solar PV, contributing greatly to the environmental sustainability in the future. So there are different things to kind of put touch into. In terms of the cost still has to come down. The research has to keep going, and more innovation is needed in terms of how we kind of integrate the system to the grid, and how we kind of optimize the use of the system, and in how we have to recycle all the systems. Thank you.
We agree that we need a lot more innovation, and some of the ways you mentioned are very creative. I didn't think of those type of innovations, like different materials is obvious, but integrating it into like the buildings, the glasses you said, and the rooftops, that's very creative, and we're looking forward to those innovations in the near future. And yeah, with that, Mr. Shasten, would you like to give us your perspective on this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I agree with a lot that was just said, and trying to take some different angles, of course, with e-waste. I think we're going to see or have to see a build out of more recycling infrastructure in the very near future. As far as like modern solar goes, most of the deployment that's happened here in the US has been over the last, 10 or 20 years. And most of the products that are installed these days last 25, 30 plus years just on the product's warranty itself. So over the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to see all this massive deployments of solar that's happened, which is incredible. But thinking about the end of life cycle for all of that equipment and all the materials, in the cells of the batteries, the silicon in the solar panels and stuff. So we're starting to see more infrastructure come alive, more companies come alive to make that more accessible, which would then make it cheaper. But as Dr. Raheem said, it unfortunately is cheaper right now to just throw it away in landfills, and that's what we see a lot of because it is there's a lack of infrastructure for recycling facilities in the States right now. Therefore, it is a more expensive option, but it is something I'm seeing talked about more, which is encouraging. Then as far as cost of the grid and batteries, I think moving forward, it's going to be a lot less, in my opinion, PV only. It's going to look a lot more. It's going to be more standard to be PV plus storage. And the reason being is it because it integrates with the current utility grid infrastructure a lot better. We showed it up here. Obviously, solar is great, but it only produces power when the sun is shining. So when the sun goes down, it's pretty strenuous on the utility grid when it has to refire up all this power usage to cover all the solar that was being produced throughout the day. So the more solar you have without batteries in a given region, the harder it is on the utility grid when the sun goes down, everybody gets home from work and starts doing laundry and the dishes and stuff like that. So you have to have batteries, and I think what that looks like is a lot of these VPP programs we're starting to see. We actually had a pilot program VPP, sorry, it stands for virtual power plant. And essentially what that looks like is, a homeowner can get a battery on their home with their solar system, or maybe not, maybe just a battery as well, where the utility company in that region has, essentially is granted access to use the energy in somebody's battery in their garage or on their house, and in times of need, if there's outages that happen. And I think the reason that could be so important is because it is helpful to current utility infrastructure that is aging. It's a lot cheaper for a utility company to utilize energy at the source of generation versus building an energy facilities somewhere, hours away from where it's actually needed, and building these transmission lines to carry all that energy into the city. And there's a lot of power loss that happens along those transmission lines, which isn't efficient there. So when you think about it, virtual power plant, you have this network of homeowners in a certain area or businesses in a certain area that all have batteries on their homes and their businesses that the utility can now access, right? So we saw it with Duke recently. It's called the Power Pair program. And it was an awesome program where Duke themselves actually offered a cash incentive up front for homeowners to install a solar plus storage system on their home. And then you essentially opt in to let Duke use your battery in your home in times of need when there's storms or outages and whatnot. For these energy peaks. So I think that's going to be definitely a huge part of the future, honestly, to help bring costs down. And then as far as infrastructure goes, just product efficiencies that continue with innovation and building more stuff in the States is definitely a big focus right now for the current administration as well. So I think that'll help to continue to hopefully long term bring costs down, locally here. So,
Yeah, thanks for your perspective. Thanks for shedding light on the storage aspect of solar energy. We knew that was a big part, but we didn't know what companies were doing or like other initiatives that were going on to make this a reality. And I think what you said about homeowners and having individual storage systems instead of like one big one somewhere out from the city and using that to transmit energy back into the city is very inefficient. So that's a really good initiative for us to be aware of. So, Dr. Kalland, what's your take on this?
So let me start, if it's okay. I'm just curious, who are my engineers? Okay, who are my business students? No business students? Interested in business? Okay. What other disciplines do we have in the room? Or at least departments or colleges? Agricultural engineering, that's a good one. Natural resources? Social sciences. So the fun thing about this sector is that you kind of need all of those things in order to get anything done. There is no easy path in energy, period. When I teach classes, the first thing I tell the students is that in the world of energy, all of our options suck, and we're just trying to do the best we can to put together the best portfolio of a bunch of sucky options. Solar is interesting right now. The things that were referenced up here are some of the limitations. Certainly, you don't get a whole lot of photovoltaic production off of moonlight. But the storage issue is well underway, or excuse me, the recycling issue, I think, is well underway towards getting solved. That's really just a supply and demand question. Quite frankly, solar panels just haven't been around long enough for us to retire enough of them for the markets to create a real opportunity for recycling. But we're starting to see the front edge of that. We have a company called Solar Power Recycling that's actually down in Salisbury that's starting to actually do this work. There are companies in Europe that are already where they're a little further ahead of us, where recycling is already well down the path. Traditional recycling of a solar panel is about 70% of the weight of a panel. It's mostly stripping off the metal frame and some of the copper wire, maybe a little bit of the glass. The rest of it was all getting landfilled. But the new recycling facilities that you see in Europe and this new facility down in Salisbury, they're probably getting up close to 95% of the materials are able to be recovered for recycling. Now, of course, the question then becomes, do we have a market for the recycled materials? And that continues to be an issue across all of recycling. But the ability to do the recycling is not a place where we need a lot of innovation. It is a place where we need a lot more market pull. And I would say that in general with solar, we really, this may be a little controversial, it's not innovation that we need in solar. Solar actually has, from a technology standpoint, gotten to a point where it's pretty mature. If you look out at the resources that you can build to generate electricity today, solar is by far the cheapest resource you can build before you get into a conversation about a 20% capacity factor versus a 95% capacity factor in nuclear. But at least from an electron standpoint, it's the cheapest source out there, and that's why we see a lot of interest in it. Storage systems, which, so we've seen solar prices drop over the last 20, 30 years by probably about 90%. Storage is on a similar curve, but it's about offset by about 10 years, maybe 15 years. And so storage prices are running down as well. One of the big issues that separates solar and storage from conventional power plants, it's a manufacturing process, not a construction process. So nuclear power plants continue to come in over cost and over budget when we do build them, and that's pretty rare because it's hard to convince Wall Street to put the kind of money necessary together to build something that big. Whereas with solar, it's the old Henry Ford thing. The more you build, the cheaper they get. Same thing with batteries. And so the cost curves for solar and storage both are bending the right direction right now. And the more that we get storage cheaper, if we actually get to longer duration storage, and this is a place where we do need innovation, is in better battery chemistries and better materials that are going to drive longer term storage. Right now, the standard is kind of a 4-hour lithium battery. And if you want more than that, you buy more batteries and stack them. If we could get to cheap materials that drive the cost of long duration storage down to a point where, storage is basically, negligible part of the cost of a project, then it becomes a foot race between renewables and storage versus things like nuclear. If you can really get to a point where the technology performs just like a large-scale power plant because you have storage that allows you to deploy it when you need it at a scale that you need it, then it gets very interesting. Probably the biggest barrier for solar right now, though, in my opinion, is actually scale. It takes a lot of space. And so this is where you get into some of the human factors conversations. Our center is spending a lot of time right now going around, talking about large-scale solar deployment. Because if you go out into communities and want to basically take something that was a cornfield for the last, 3 generations and tell them that you want to stop farming it and put it into solar, it doesn't make the neighbors very happy. The reality is we've got pretty strong energy demand curves right now. This conversation around AI and data centers is making the curve for energy demand point upward and to the right pretty aggressively in a way that we haven't seen probably in my lifetime, actually, and I'm unfortunately really old. But what that means is that there's a lot of demand for energy and it's got to come from somewhere. There's a lot of conversation around nuclear, but we're probably 13 years minimum away from building another nuclear power plant anywhere in this country, maybe longer, depending on how the regulatory stuff goes. There's a lot of conversation about natural gas, but there's actually a shortage of natural gas turbines available right now. If you don't already have them ordered, there's about a 6-year backlog to get a gas turbine. There's efforts to try and ramp up new manufacturing for gas turbines, but it's going to take time. And so if you're interested in getting power to run a data center in the next 3 years, your options are pretty much solar, wind, or and the grid, which is going to be available and would be supplemented by these things. So data centers are driving a lot of demand. That is potentially going to create a lot of upward pressure on electricity prices. And if we build really expensive things in order to satisfy that demand, that's going to be a problem. And so, all of these trends basically say that solar is going to be a good short-term option, even with the loss of some of the federal, incentives that we saw in the last couple of years. And the better that storage gets, the better that solar gets. And so I completely agree with Shasten that, we need the storage technologies, and, probably in the next 5 years, you're just not going to see solar get installed without storage. One possible exception, and I'll go to Raheem's point about building integrated photovoltaics. We had a big push on building integrated photovoltaics late 90s-ish, and there was a lot of effort to try and find ways to do solar. At those times, we didn't do big utility-scale solar fields. We mostly did solar on rooftops, and there was a lot of concern about solar on rooftops because the previous solar technology, solar water heating, solar thermal technologies for heating water at a locality were frankly ugly. And it got a lot of homeowners associations and people that lived near buildings pretty mad that there were this ugly thing on the roof. And so the solar electric guys said, let's see if we can come up with building integrated shingles that have PV built in, or roof tiles or other pretty things that are going to make solar possible. And we designed a bunch of that stuff. You may have even heard of some of them. The problem was they really jacked up the price of solar. And when somebody figured out that we could start building this in a larger scale in a field and drive the cost down by a factor of 10, the interest in building integrated solutions went away. But now that we're seeing all of this community resistance to solar deployment at large scale, the idea of doing more on rooftops in places where it makes sense, is coming back. And so that's a place where innovation lies. And I think that there's an opportunity there. And if we can focus on those technologies and getting their price down, you're not going to put enough solar on rooftops or other types of buildings to meet our energy demand. There's just not enough viable rooftops. There's too many trees out there that shade buildings, or roofs that were not built with the contemplation of heavy materials on the roof or whatever it might be. But you could probably take a good 20% out of our energy demand by doing that if we had better technology to do it with. So that's an innovation point.
It's interesting to hear how social factors could also push into innovations, need for or different innovations, like you mentioned. And that's what sustainability is all about. That's what solving sustainability is all about, is to explore the integration of environmental factors, the social factors, and also innovation, and how they all play together to create a more sustainable future. And especially the times we live in and the policies we have and our current short-term needs influence a lot of innovations. So that's really interesting to hear.
Yeah, thanks again for the answer to that question. That was a very in-depth answer, and it was nice to hear about the realities of solar and where we are now, especially relative to other energy sources as well. Now, if we can shift our perspective from the more technical side to a bit of the more policy side, again with Dr. Kalland. Some background: a big issue with solar energy today is that not everyone has equal access to it, with some not having reliable grid connections and others not having the policies or support needed to get started. So the question becomes, how do we make solar something everyone can have access to, not just the people who can easily afford it?
Well, again, I would say that it's important to remember that of all of the new energy options that you can construct today, solar is actually the cheapest option. The problem, and here's another opportunity for innovation, is in the business plan. We don't build solar power plants for homes. We build large central station power plants and then transport portions of power from those power plants over the grid to individual homes. In essence, we're all renting a piece of a large-scale power plant with our electric bill every month. And that business plan is not as conducive to putting a upfront capital cost on your personal bank account to put your piece of the power plant on your roof, particularly if that power plant only operates 20% of the time, and so you're still going to need the grid on top of that. So what we need are more business models that allow solar to be affordable in those buildings where it can be deployed on the customer side of the meter, while at the same time finding more ways to get solar integrated into the utilities business model so that it becomes a part of what everybody that's just paying their electric bill is getting. North Carolina is actually a little bit ahead on this curve. We actually have a state law that says that by 2050, we're supposed to have a decarbonized electric grid. Now, a big chunk of that's going to probably be nuclear because we're already at about 35% in this state of nuclear power, and we probably have more on the horizon. But we're not a big state for wind unless you look at offshore wind, and we've got some struggles with the current administration on that front, but we do have good offshore wind opportunity. But solar is ubiquitous across the state, and there's a lot of places that we can use it. And so if we're going to achieve a 100% decarbonized grid in North Carolina by 2050, as state law requires right now, we're going to have to look at all of these options. And so that's going to mean virtual power plants where homeowners are incentivized by the utility to put solar on their rooftop and to use it when they can, and to make it available to the utility to shave a peak when it's 95 degrees in August, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the utility is trying to avoid turning on a coal-fired power plant to meet that little bit of extra that they need. That's going to require innovative financing through mortgages where we can integrate photovoltaics into a rooftop or into a building and have the delta of the cost of integrating that technology versus the delta of increase in your mortgage amount, work out so that you're saving money in week one. It's going to require the grid continuing to move, whether by state law or by utility business model, in the direction of incorporating more renewable energy so that everybody that's buying electricity is doing so, and it's already incorporating a lot of solar. But that has to be done in a way that doesn't jack prices so that electricity rates go up to the point where people can't afford them. One last thing I'll add, and I know we're a solar discussion tonight, but I always tell people, you're a freaking idiot if you look at putting solar on your house before you've found every piece of energy efficiency that you can find first. If you do energy efficiency, you're reducing the amount of energy you need, which means you can buy a smaller solar system for your needs at your house. So please, please, please look at energy efficiency, even the simple stuff, caulking and weather stripping and film on your windows to keep the sun out when you don't need it. Those little things actually really do add up, and they'll make your electric bill smaller, save you some money, and it'll make solar a more viable option for your house.
That was a very unbiased opinion and advice. And like you mentioned, Dr. Kalland, you were talking about business models and how we need better business models and more a connection with the community, not just some big company building solar panels and distributing the energy to consumers. So, Mr. Shasten, would you like to expand on that and talk about business models and what green tech maybe is doing to improve solar energy? And if you could also answer, what do you see are the biggest economical opportunities and the hurdles in expanding solar adoption?
Yeah, I think for opportunities, a lot of stuff that's been referenced tonight. Steve just talked about innovation in some of the business models. I think is a big piece of that. Dr. Raheem talked about equipment innovation as well, inefficiency and everything. I think will continue to drive costs down, as well as innovative solutions such as these virtual power plant programs that we've seen here in North Carolina already, and we're seeing across the country as well. Incentivizing from the utility grid, finding out better ways to integrate this technology into the current infrastructure. And as far as hurdles go, I think certainly short term is policy headwinds. I think our industry, we joke and call it the solar coaster, which is a very fitting term for us because it seems like certainly at least every 4 years with a president change, we see some very, very large political swings to overcorrect in either direction. And it's really hard, for lack of a better way to say it, it's really hard for the industry to find any sense of consistency when it comes to demand or what incentives are available, and forecasting out long term for small businesses who are helping to deploy this product, and manufacturers as well who are trying to build it based off of certain demand and credits that are available. So we recently saw a 30% tax credit get stripped away when the big beautiful bill was signed in July last year, and it gave us 6 months to prepare as an industry for 30% tax credit going away. Is a big deal, right? So if as of January 1st of this year, solar essentially got 30% more expensive overnight. That's really hard for the industry to adjust to. It fluctuates the demand. It created a lot of artificial demand at the end of the year. Everyone trying to get systems installed before the end of the year, which was strenuous on equipment suppliers trying to build enough product to meet that demand, but not build too much product to where there's an oversupply situation, which causes cash flow issues going into the beginning of the year when now there's been a reduction in demand. So I think that's something that we advocated for in Washington D.C. a lot in over the course of last year before that bill got signed, and the ask was, I don't think solar necessarily needs these federal incentives to survive, right? Power costs continue to climb, equipment costs continue to go down. Solar just makes too much sense in a lot of ways, and I think it's going to continue to do so. But what we need is some, policy consistency, tax policy consistency, and I think that's where there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the industry to find some to smoothen some things out, I guess. And I think a lot of that comes too with and I'm not as involved in this portion since we are just an equipment distribution company. I've never installed a solar system myself, but I know there's a lot of issues going on with interconnection, policy and stuff. So I think finding some ways to streamline that with utility companies, and more like universal standards for approving these systems to get put online also reduces the cost of installation. I think there's a ton of opportunity there and a lot of advocacy work going on here in North Carolina and around the country there as well. So yeah, I think some consistent tax policy and interconnection consistency and innovation there as well is definitely maybe where our biggest opportunities are.
That was a great answer. Thanks for delving into the governmental aspect of it, especially. And now I know we've kind of already addressed this, but Dr. Ariwoola, given your expertise, we were wondering if you could perhaps go into more detail or offer another perspective about how solar panel efficiency is being improved through new materials, better storage, batteries, and design, given your work at NC State specifically.
All right. So in terms of the efficiencies, so I'll try to break this down in probably three spots. The efficiencies of the solar cell itself, they vary by type. And as Steve has said, there are really not much you can do with some certain types of solars. For example, you have the crystalline solar. The efficiency has been tested for years, and there's pretty much nothing you can probably do right now that will increase the efficiency significantly. So it's right there at the peak of this curve. All right. So there are probably additional, materials right now that's been tested in the lab. So the National Renewable Energy Laboratory usually publish a data sheet like every year about the solar cell efficiencies, their current status. So you see different types: the thin film cells, the perovskite cells, the dye synthesized cells, the organic cells. The efficiency keeps climbing, but what matters is that most of these new technology or new materials are not really, but I mean, they have a lot of degradations to them, and they're not really stable like the crystalline solar cells. So we have the crystalline solar cells has been widely accepted, and we have the efficiency at its peak. So if we talk about, some of the improvement that needs to be done in terms of efficiencies, so we'll just encourage, the research to keep going on probably the thin film cells or the synthesized cells and some of these other, materials. So, the scientists are mixing some recipes right now, I mean, in the lab. So a lot going on. And most of the materials being used are kind of environmentally friendly. You have the coppers, sulfur, selenium. So some of these materials are quite environmentally friendly and could be recycled as well. So in terms of lab efficiencies, there's pretty much good work going on to improve solar PVs. So the issue is all about, the manufacturing costs of some of these new technologies. There's still a lot to do in bringing some of those costs down to kind of compete with the crystalline silicon. Um, so that's one aspect of it. So then the degradation of stability needs to be improved upon. Now, when we talk about, how you improve the efficiency when you are even, installing the solar, I'll start from the design of the PV itself. You have like a data sheet. You have the crystalline solar. They've told you the efficiency is probably 22% or 24%. You already know what that is. Then you have your inverters, probably the efficiency are around 98% or 99%. You already know what that is as well. So some of the things as an engineer that you could vary are probably through the modeling, the design itself to improve the amount of generation that you can have in your building. So let me take, for instance, the Fitzwiller right there, the solar PV. There's around there's 153 kilowatts PV on top of the roof of Fitzwiller. On top of this roof at Partners One as well, so there's a PV around 22 kilowatt, I guess. So this is the north side of the building. So the solar PV I think, is facing the south side. So when the model was done, it was done in Helioscope. There are different softwares out there to kind of do this, PV Watt, Helioscope, and some grid kind of software to kind of the area that has the most highest efficiencies if you put it facing the southeast, I guess, yeah. And when you now look at the number of solar PVs that could be installed, the models that could be installed, when you face that direction, it's less than when you have it facing the south. So, coming up with some kind of those models, then making some kind of informed decisions. Where do I face this? Is this the south side or the east side? So that comes in the way of improving your own generation. I want to echo something Steve said. Like, you have to make sure that you improve the energy in your building before you put on a PV. It's very important. So that comes to, the operational efficiency. So when you have a building, you need to make sure all those things that are energy efficient are first put in place before you invest in solar in that particular building. Fitzwillard Hall right here is a very good spot for this PV because it's a new building, it's a smart building, it's a modernized building. So which means we have a whole lot of equipment or some kind of devices, sensors in the building that could optimize energy in the building. For example, the lighting in there are already LED. You can't do much to that anymore. It's got some control sensors in the building that can vary, that kicks light on or off when it's occupied or unoccupied. Some of the control sensors are tied into the building automation system as well to vary the heating, ventilation, the energy that's relating to the HVAC system, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system of the building. So all these are already done in the building before we went ahead to kind of put solar on top of it. So assuming if the lighting in the building are still metal halides and you put on a solar PV, so you just offsetting whatever that the inefficiencies that's coming from that lighting. So now the operational efficiency now comes in one way. So that's localized into the building itself. But there are some other efficiency improvements that needs to be done. So you have to combine solar PVs with some other renewable energy source. So I know there's been talk about having PV goes along with the battery. Yes. Before Fitzwillard PV was pitched, before it was sold, so it was a combination of a PV and a battery. So I know Steve Office did a great job, in that particular study as well. The battery right here, we have a battery on campus, a battery energy storage. It's right here at your back, in Partners One here. So when you go outside, there's a big cabinet, looks like a container. So that's 230 kilowatt for 250 kW, 430 kilowatt kiloamps hour battery over there. So all those goes together. But because NC State, we kind of have like a single metering point, so the solar PV and the battery were not integrated together. So, which means we just have like a very single point of collection. So, if it's to be like a residential building, yes, it makes sense. I mean, you can integrate them together; it doesn't matter. But here, you don't really have to because we have like a huge substation that that's where all our energy is being built from. So it doesn't matter whether you put the PV at Fitzwillard or Partners One or some other areas. So it all works for just one single substation. So to improve the efficiencies in that regard, so we have like a mix of energy sources. Particularly on this campus, we have another cogeneration like the CHP. We have thermal energy storage as well, which also acts like a battery, but it's kind of just store chill water system. So we generate chill water during the night and during the day when the chill water is needed for the HVAC system in the building, we kind of, distribute chill water to all the buildings. So what that means is we have different types of resources working together. So we don't have solar PV alone to kind of act as we just want to rely on this particular energy technology for this campus. We have mixed. So having the power of that mix makes a whole lot of more of sense. You can control things. So that way we are able to kind of optimize some of these different energy strategies that we have already deployed on campus. So in terms to sum it up, so I've broken down the way we kind of see the efficiencies into, the lab efficiencies, what is being done currently, then the generational efficiency, like the design, and the operational efficiencies, like what you will have to kind of expect, and the integrations that needs to come up with all these new technologies, new energy generation technologies on ground. So it's always good to assume, like, solar PV, it works with some kind of equipment like the solar inverter, and like even the PV itself can can stay like 25, 30, 35 years, depending on the manufacturer or this kind of solar PV you look at. But you have all these devices that makes the PV work, like the inverters. So most of the inverters, these are electronics. So if you're a facility manager, you understand that most electronics equipment, like the VFDs or some of these inverters, they don't go beyond 10, 12, 15 years. So they don't keep up with the lifespan of the PV. So at the long run, there will be like a situation where you will have to kind of change some of this equipment for your solar PV to kind of keep working. So in that regard, so I don't think there's probably some kind of improvement that needs to be done or innovation that needs to be done in terms of all those electronics system, because that's just how they kind of work, and it's been. But if there are some kind of research that needs to be done to kind of improve on the lifespan of those equipment as well, to kind of go along with the PV lifespan, yeah, that would be exciting.
Yeah, thanks for that. I never thought of the operational or like the building design and how much of that plays a role in solar energy's efficiency. So, yeah, going forward, what do you each think should be done related to your own personal experience, whether related to policy, business models, or innovations, to make solar energy a more prominent and sustainable future energy source?
Yeah, I'll hopefully make this quick. I think a big piece is education and advocacy. I think what you guys are doing here is awesome. I mentioned before the podcast started, I was in college like you guys not too long ago, about 7 years ago, and um, this stuff wasn't really being talked about in schools. It wasn't very prominent, and I think it's really important what the kind of work that you guys are doing here and taking an interest in this and helping to educate younger folks about it, which I think in turn is y'all will be the future energy leaders, in the country or around the world, wherever you end up. And I think that goes along with a lot of the advocacy work that's being done and educating, lawmakers as well. They're not necessarily energy professionals. They're listening to other folks and making these, political decisions based off of that. So I think more education is great in how this technology works, how it can be integrated, and utilized most efficiently, and how it can be incorporated alongside other energy resources as well. Right? There's a lot of talk around, and I don't think there's any debate that we're definitely needing to take an all of the above type of approach as we head into the future with an unforeseen level of energy demand increase right now with AI stuff going on and whatnot. So again, continuing to advocate for solar energy and its benefits, and how it works, I think is really important to make sure, for some of these political headwinds and stuff that we faced. And also educating, I think it's going to take some more investment from utilities as well and their admittance into how this technology can be utilized better, and how they can actually take advantage of it as well in terms of utilizing it to help ratepayers, help with maintenance of their infrastructure, energy demand, energy production as well. So there's still a lot of work to be done. It's still a young industry for sure, but again, what you guys are doing here is awesome, and I think this is definitely necessary right here. So
I would say, if research keeps going and keep growing, Especially at NC State here, there's a lot of research going on the integration of renewable energy to the smart grid. There's new research. I think Steve can probably tell more about the battery energy research, the new center. There's been a lot going on. So before solar energy, um, I mean, before we think, this will keep improving for the future, that particular aspect of integration with the smart grid needs to be taken care of. So we probably are probably consumers, but the consumers are turning to prosumers, so which means they're generating, they're producing and consuming at the same time. So, but the utility side, there's been a lot of struggle, and it all depends on integration of all these resources with the smart grid system. Because more generation will lead to, you need capacity for transmission, you need capacity for distribution. There are a lot of things going on. I mean, electrical engineers will probably tell you some of the imbalances on the system whenever there is an imbalance in the system. So the interconnection capability. So all those areas needs to be studied and improved on. So integration of all this technology with the smart grid to ensure that the grid is reliable, resilient, and can support all these resources will be very, very valuable for the future of the PV in the future. Then I know you mentioned about the rates keep increasing. So if you have installed PV maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, you probably be hitting it right now. Like, hey, I'm getting good return on investment because the utility rate keep going up. All right. So to me, as a homeowner or a residential consumer, if I look at the utility bill and it's probably increased like probably $10 compared to my previous bill for the same month last year. So comparing that with the university, that $10 is probably translating to probably 1.5 million or $2 million with the university system. So what that means is that if we have installed probably some of these new technology or the solar PV system, so that's in the past, that's amount right now, we'll probably be having like a good return on investment right now. And there's no hidden point in these. In that, whenever you have like utilities goes up, the university has to pay. Okay, and that funding that goes to the increase in utility rates probably will have been used in different things for the university, like hiring graduate students, or probably sponsoring student interns, or so the cost will have been, put into place to some other good use for the university. So the costs keep going up. So the longer we wait, I don't think with data center and AI kind of coming up, so I don't think the utility rates are gonna get down anytime soon. So the benefits are still there for solar to keep competing, and the integration with the other utility grids are what will make it more viable in the future. So we have used the technology here on campus for different things. Specifically, we've used it during the curtailment period. So we've used it during demand response period. So Duke Energy says, hey, don't use more than this energy, you understand? So, we have resources like the solar PV, the battery that we could easily deploy to the utility grids to ensure that we are in conformance with whatever Duke Energy is kind of requesting. So that will be my point. Then the future keeps promising for solar PV. As the other speakers have said, the pricings are good and they're still the cheapest right now. But the integration and how it works with the other renewable resources that keep growing are very, very essential and valuable to kind of study and to improve upon. Thank you.
So I know we're bumping up against time, so I'll try to be quick here. But, in reverse order, innovations, got a bunch of engineers in the room here. Go find us a battery chemistry that gives us longer duration storage at a cheap price that we can manufacture in a way that makes it cheaper and cheaper. Energy storage is the key to the game right now. We've got a lot of solar. I will say that there are pieces of solar, and Raheem alluded to some of these, the bioorganic solar, perovskites, other technologies. If we can ever get those technologies to a point where they're so cheap that we don't care how much space they take, or they're so easy to integrate into buildings, that we don't care, that's going to be helpful. But again, there's just only so much space in those kinds of opportunities. And so we're still going to have central station solar, I think, as well as a lot of other central station power. Business models, it really comes down to utility business models. I mean, the way utilities are structured right now, for the most part, they get paid when they build big things and then rent it to you in your electric bill. They call it an electric bill, not a rent check. But in essence, you're basically taking big pieces of equipment and you're breaking it into small payments, and then you're charging a whole lot of people. And that gives them a guaranteed rate of return that's regulated and so on and so forth. We need to find business models that give those utilities incentives to incorporate more of these kinds of technologies. That's going to take changes in how the utilities are regulated. It's going to take changes in how we view the finances associated with power production. So that's a big spot for business model change. In terms of policy, is anybody here not a firm believer in the fact that climate change is out there and is man-made and is a problem? Anybody? I mean, you're welcome to disagree with me if you don't think so. I will tell you about 100 reasons why you're wrong when we get off this podcast. But the long and short is, I feel bad. I'm 56, I'm almost 57 years old, and my generation has really screwed the pooch for you guys. You guys are going to inherit a big mess. And, really, I think the only way that we're going to get out of this hole right now is with better policy that kind of forces the issue, because nothing else forces faster. If we have to wait for market forces, things are going to get, slow. If we have to wait for a disaster to happen, well, that's not optimal either. Those are the things that normally move things in this country, though. And so if you're not going to have a disaster and you're not going to have, market forces do it on its own, we need some policy to drive this. And, whether that is similar to North Carolina's, decarbonization law by 2050, or it's tax incentives, as Shasten was mentioning, that help to drive the market pull. There are a million different interesting policies out there that can help us make this energy transition to low carbon resources. And solar is a big piece of it, but I don't want to downplay the nuclear piece. I don't want to downplay, even in the short run, natural gas as a bridge fuel to get us there, because it's certainly a lot better than coal and oil. But the reality is, policy is the key to all of this conversation. It's what makes business model change possible. It's what's going to drive the research dollars to make innovation possible. And so policy is where it starts, policy is where it ends. If we don't get better policy, we're going to have problems. So all of you that are engineers, and it seemed like that was the majority of the crowd here, one thing I always tell students when they are in classes that I'm teaching, get multidisciplinary. Don't just be an engineer. Don't just be a policy person. Policy people that understand technology and technology people that understand policy are the most valuable people on the market. They're the people that this guy wants to hire. They're the people that are going to actually drive the change in the future. So, to the extent that you have that opportunity to try and find ways to diversify your skill set, you're going to become a more valuable piece of the solution. So that may be a good place to sum it up.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. We want to thank our speakers for their time and expertise. Solving sustainability is all about raising awareness and taking action to build a sustainable future. Thanks everyone for joining us today to talk about solar power, and we'll see you in the next one.